Suppose they had not migrated, in that case you would have had, in Europe, huge increase in the number of persons without jobs. So the whole idea that capitalism tends to absorb everybody who is displaced by the process of primitive accumulation of capital is wrong. And what is more, there were a lot of people displaced by the process of primitive accumulation of capital in the colonies. Think of the deindustrialization, think of the Bengal weavers who lost their occupation. They continued to remain a part of the pauperized mass. They didn't get any employment as capitalists. So all those who argue this way limit their vision only to Europe, keep their eyes closed to the fact of immigration, and attribute to capitalism a virtue that it never had. The third reason, the third point is that if it is the case that capitalism is forever carrying out a process of primitive accumulation, if it is the case that the victims of this primitive accumulation, of this destruction of petty production, which Rosa Luxemburg talked about, the destruction of petty production and the victims of it are not absorbed into the capitalist system, only a few of them are absorbed, but the others linger on as a vast pauperized mass. In that case, this process of primitive accumulation cannot just be said to be a part of mankind's historical progress. It is in fact the establishment on a massive scale of the growth of wealth at one pole and poverty at another. Now, if this is the case, then it becomes necessary to recognize, which Marx did not at that point of time, namely that capitalist exploitation is of course exploitation of the workers, but simultaneously capitalism ruthlessly oppresses the peasantry, ruthlessly oppresses petty producers, ruthlessly oppresses vast numbers of other people who are thrown as a vast pauperized mass as far as the system is concerned. If so, then the nature of the revolution must be one in which the working class comes to the aid of these different groups, and therefore the basis of the worker-peasant alliance arises from the fact that capitalism oppresses not only the workers, but also all these petty producers and the peasantry. Now, Lenin argued for a worker-peasant alliance on a completely different grounds, which remain valid. But what I'm saying is in addition to that. What was Lenin's argument? Lenin's argument was that in countries that come late to capitalism, by that time capitalism is already facing a socialist challenge. It's already facing the challenge of the proletariat. Therefore, capitalism actually makes common cause with the old feudal elements. Unlike what had happened in the French Revolution, when the bourgeoisie had actually destroyed feudal property and distributed land among the peasantry, in countries that come late to capitalism, and he had in mind Russia, the bourgeoisie lacks the ability to actually carry through that anti-feudal revolution. As a result, the anti-feudal democratic revolution has to be carried through by the proletariat. Land reforms, land redistribution is not done by the bourgeoisie, land redistribution would have to be done by the proletariat. And since it is the proletariat that actually has the role of meeting the aspirations of the peasantry, that makes possible a worker-peasant alliance, and a worker-peasant alliance then becomes the basis for the democratic revolution. But the proletariat, having done so, does not then go back home and say, all right, now let's develop capitalism. It carries on that democratic revolution towards socialism by having alliances within the peasantry that keep changing over time. This is what Lenin argued in his two tactics of social democracy. But that argument derived, the argument for the worker-peasant alliance derived from the fact that the peasantry's aspirations for land and freedom from the feudal yoke could only be fulfilled by the proletariat. In other words, the worker-peasant alliance that was being talked about was the worker-peasant alliance which arose because of the fact that capitalism politically was not in a position to meet the aspirations of the peasantry. But what I'm suggesting is, in addition to that, we have to recognize that in fact the working of capitalism itself, not just politically, the economic working of capitalism itself is one that not only exploits the workers, but also squeezes through a continuous process of primitive accumulation of capital, the peasantry, the petty producers and so on, squeezes their incomes, dispossesses them from their assets and so on, and therefore increases the number of the pauperized mass, because such immigration possibilities are not open to countries like India. In fact, someone made a calculation. From Britain, in the period 1815 to 1910, the number of people who migrated to the United States and all these other temperate regions of white settlement was roughly equal to half the increase in population every year. In other words, suppose population was increasing by a certain number, the people migrating were half that number every year. If you make a similar calculation for today, then the scale of migration from India since independence should have been about 40 crores. Now, where would they go? So those possibilities are not open to capitalism in countries like ours, which is why in countries like ours, you actually find that capitalist development is being associated with an enormous increase in poverty and an enormous increase in the vast pauperized mass. Now, this is something which is not recognized, which is not widely recognized. By the way, I should say that, I referred to Marx's perspective being epistemically outside of the system. Every oppressive system wants to ensure that you are epistemically inside it. Mane baire theke dekha is not allowed, because once you do that, you have got an alternative. What is Tina? There is no alternative. That means you must be trapped within the system. And the entire education reform that is being done now is to bring about this epistemological trapping, that you must remain enclosed within the system itself. Why? Because obviously, if you have any critical thinking, if you have any critical, social sciences have to be abandoned, humanities have to be abandoned. You do management and so on, where typically you never get an opportunity to raise questions about the system, and so on. That or better still, you do kind of astrology and such like things, where of course the system doesn't even figure as something to be studied, etc. So the whole objective, and what is more, if fees are raised, if they are self-financing, fees have to be raised. If fees are raised, then whoever is actually making that investment to get an education must be a person who can recoup that investment, and you can do so only by getting a job that is paying, and you don't get a paying job if you are critical of the system. Okay, no multinational employs you if you think multinationals are exploiting the workers. So this epistemic closure is forever being attempted, and that is why, and one implication of it is that everywhere an effort is sought to be conveyed that, look, people are all benefiting from all this neoliberal capitalism, that poverty is going down rapidly in this country. Shobai khushi, shobai shukhi, which is complete rubbish. Let me just give you one figure. I know one can go on giving figures, but no point. In our country, poverty is defined in terms of whether you manage to meet a calorie norm. Anybody in urban India who can get 2,100 calories per person per day is supposed to be, that's the norm. Anybody below that is poor, anybody above that is not poor. That's the definition. In rural India, anybody getting less than 2,200 calories per day is supposed to be poor. You simply calculate between 1993-4 and 2011-12. These are years in which we had the National Sample Survey, which makes very large kind of surveys and so on, goes to thousands of people and gets questionnaires, etc. The proportion of the total rural population that was below this calorie norm in 1993-4 was 58%. The proportion of the total rural population below this norm in 2011-12 is 68%. All this is straightforward government's own data. Okay, I'm not kind of, saying anything, this is the government's own data. When you look at urban areas, similarly, below 2,100 calories, 57% and 65%. Okay. The substantial increase in poverty, defined by the government itself, the criteria are provided by the government itself, substantial increase in poverty in this period. But then how is it that everybody says that people are better off? Again, it's the way you look at it. Let me give you an example. Recently, in Delhi, very close to where I live, there's a big hospital called Max Hospital. A family from UP brought their child to Max Hospital because the child was suffering from dengue fever. The child had to be hospitalized. The child was in the hospital for 18 days, after which they said that, look, sorry, you have to pay the